I declare the ordinary council meeting of the 25th of July 2023 held at Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, open at 5:31 p.m. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. So I'll take attendances now. I think we've got all councillors in attendance, with myself and 7 councillors here in person and Councillor Powell attending by Zoom. We've got the CEO and all other members of the executive leadership team here in person, and various other staff available to assist and advise as required, and they'll be announced as they're called upon. No leave of absence requests I'm aware of. Are there any disclosures of interest that weren't made last week at the agenda briefing? Okay, just confirming that Councillor Kosovich has made a disclosure previously, so that'll stand for this week as well.
Do you want me to make one now?
Is it the same one? We've got a copy? No, we've got a copy on file, so that's fine. Okay, there were no previous public questions taken on notice and no public questions submitted, so that brings us to public statement time. We'll begin with a statement on C1 by Derek Bickley from Dynamic Planning and Developments on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and officers from the City of Subiaco. My name is Derek Bickley from Dynamic Planning and Developments, and with me today is Daniel Lommer from Daniel Lommer Designs, the architect on this project. And we are here on behalf of the landowner of 9 Luth Avenue, Daglish. We appreciate the opportunity to present this evening, and through this presentation, we'd firstly like to thank the City officers for the collaborative approach and work completed to date. We are supportive of the officers' favourable recommendation of approval and the conditions contained within. Secondly, we also wish to provide councillors with additional information regarding the items discussed during the agenda briefing forum and to demonstrate the extensive design review process that has resulted in an excellent form of development. Finally, we're available to respond to any questions the council may have. During the agenda briefing forum, concerns were raised with overshadowing to 10B Nichols Street, as well as the lack of visitor parking afforded by the proposed development, to which we wish to provide some additional information in support of the City officer responses, and to reiterate that these items meet the deemed to comply criteria of the R codes and are therefore compliant. Under the R60 density coding prescribed, the deemed to comply requirements for overshadowing is up to 50%, and the proposed development therein provides a total of 36.7%, well under the deemed to comply requirements of the R codes. Further, the overshadowing, as evidenced by the development plans provided, do not negatively impact the outdoor living spaces of the southern landowner. Regarding the visitor parking bays and subsequent land tenure discussions that form part of this, the subdivision is now in order for dealings with the lots considered to be created soon enough. And as such, these lots will be created prior to the construction of the 5 dwellings. Therefore, the City's assessment is reinforced and the deemed to comply requirement for visitor bays still remains at nil. The proposed development over its lifetime has been to DRP 3 times in the last year. This is to ensure that the proposal is supported from a design perspective and offers a quality outcome for the City of Subiaco. The comments received at each of the DRP meetings were addressed and or incorporated into the design, most notably reorientating the garage of Green Title Lot 1 to be accessed from the common driveway to lessen the impact on the streetscape. Other key design changes were the increasing of the lot boundary setback of Survey Strata Lot 3 to further reduce the impact on that adjoining landowner, and the increase in the overall materiality and landscaping of the proposed development. Through this design process, the resultant development maximises the interface with the adjoining reserve, and the retention of the existing jacaranda tree results in a development that reinforces the green character of Daglish. In conclusion, we again want to reiterate that we are supportive of the City officers' recommendations and are available to answer any questions the Council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further public statements and no petitions or approved deputations this evening. So I'll ask Council to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, being those of the Ordinary Council meeting of 27 June 2023. Can I have a mover and a second, please? Councillor De Vries and Councillor Jennings. All those in favour? Anyone against? Councillor Burns, did you vote? For or against? Okay, we'll call that carried unanimously. Okay, some announcements by myself. This month, councillors, I thought that our community development team deserves a mention. I've been to 3 events this month and each one was a great success for the team and therefore the city as well. Earlier this month, and it seems like a long time ago, but in the first week of July, the city celebrated NAIDOC Week, and as part of that we had a gathering that started in the Subiaco Library. That began with the morning tea, which the city had catered by a majority Indigenous-owned catering company, and it was complete with a traditional dance by 3 dancers and a welcome to country. We then made our way outside to the now empty council and admin building and had a flag raising assisted by members of the Subi Kids crew, and also what I would say was the highlight of the morning being a smoking ceremony. Last week, the city ran its first Positive Ageing Expo. It was a great initiative by the community development team, and the idea was to showcase community groups, services and activities that are available out there for people who are over 55 in our community. There were about 15 exhibitors who brought with them a range of products, services and knowledge, and they were all tailored specifically for older members of our community. There were things ranging from activities and new hobbies right through to support services. It was a direct response to community feedback and confusion around governance support services available to older people, and I think we had about 15 stallholders there in total, and there were the likes of Advocare, Salvation Army, one of the local tennis clubs, the Men's Shed, so it was quite a great variety of exhibitors on display. The verbal feedback from attendees and exhibitors was that it was all very positive, so well done to all those involved in that event. And the final event I wanted to mention was the Sean Tan Awards last night. In fact, it's a perennial favourite and it's in its 21st year, but the thing that was particularly impressive this year was that we had 1,400 entries from places as far away as Kununurra, Norseman, Dunsborough and Esperance. And the MC was a member of the Subiaco Voice of Youth. So we're very much getting the kids involved in all these types of things, and we even had a Subi Kids Crew member there to announce a Subi Kids Crew Award. So 3 great events this month, and as always there's professional quality videos and photos on the city's social media, which I'd encourage everyone to check out. Thank you. Now we'll get on to the reports of committees and officers. I've got a possible en bloc vote in front of me, and at present the en bloc vote would consist of items AR1, AR2, C1, C4, C5 and C6 on the basis that there's been no amendments or alternatives submitted in relation to those items. Councillors, did anyone want to remove any of those items from the en bloc vote?
Mayor, could you just give me the numbers again?
AR1, AR2, C1, C4, C5 and C6.
4, please. And 5. 5. You said 5.
5 at present's part of the en bloc. Okay, councillors, that leaves AR1, AR2, C1 and C6. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the en bloc vote, please? Councillor White. Councillor Burns. All those in favour? The en bloc votes carried unanimously, which, for the benefit of people watching the meeting, means that those items have been carried without debate. Councillors, that brings us to item C2, Draft Local Planning Policy 1.3, Sustainable Development. We've got an amendment from Councillor Jennings and an officer report that the draft policy go out for advertising. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation, please? Councillor Stroud. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Jennings. Not Councillor Jennings. Councillor Hammersley. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. So we have before us a draft local planning policy for a 21-day public advertising. The policy 1.3, titled Sustainable Development, aims to facilitate environmental and sustainable built form design outcomes in new single and grouped dwellings, as well as facilitate significant additions and alterations to existing single houses and group dwellings. And significant is defined. This policy does not apply to the R Codes Volume 2 apartments. This policy is innovative in its approach to sustainable development and the first of its kind in WA. The policy aligns with the city's LPS 5 strategy and scheme, as well as the city's environmental plan, and it's considered to be offering many benefits not only for the environment but also for improved living standard for the occupant. The policy's adoption lines with the the Subiaco Community Plan Focus Area 6 Council leadership, aligning with a council that is innovative and responsive. So how does it work? Well, proponents are given a choice from a point-based system for 15 sustainable measures where there is no mandated inclusion. And generally the choice is expected to be 4 of that 15 or less will meet the requirements of the policy. Single houses and group dwellings must reach 100 points, with alterations and additions meeting 75 points. Apparently flexibility is the key here so that the proponent can best suit the sustainability measure to their site and budget. The average modelled cost is suggested to be an additional $8,000. The sustainability measures cover a range including solar power, tree retention, glazing, water reuse and retention, and electric vehicle charges. This policy has been workshopped with an addition of clause 3.6, enabling proponents to self-nominate an alternative sustainability measure, which stands as item 15, and there are associated requirements to meeting this clause. I believe this is a very important clause. Originally, I was concerned about how much the measures actually covered choice, because, for example, recycling building material and so on. But 3.6, by being able to self-nominate another sustainability measure and then justify it, to me rounds it up very nicely. I congratulate staff on their initiative and recommend this policy with consideration to the amendment. And this policy is ready to go out for public advertising. Thank you.
Councillor Hammersley. Any other speakers? Okay, we'll test Councillor Jennings's amendment at this point then. It's been submitted and circulated within time, so I'll take it as read. Does anyone have a seconder for Councillor Jennings's amendment? Councillor Burns. Councillor Jennings, did you want to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly, I think it's self-evident what it is intended to do. Staff are agreeable to that, and it's just fleshing out in an important way, I think, that what the objectives of the policy are. Maybe it's implicit in there that all the measures would be retained for the life of a development, but I don't think it hurts to say that in the objectives, so I don't think it's changing anything, it's just supplementing and clarifying. Thank you.
Councillor Burns. Look, I've just got a question for staff, and maybe it's self-evident, maybe it's not, but in any of our other planning policies, do we talk about measures being imposed in perpetuity?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I don't believe we do, but in any event, when an approval is provided without an end date, that approval would last until that development is in place and essentially is in perpetuity. So I don't think it will be inconsistent with the way approvals or conditions are attached. But I wouldn't be able to definitely say if we use that word or not. It may not, but we do think it is used in this policy in any event in different clauses throughout. So what Councillor Jennings' amendment is doing is simply adding an additional mention in the objectives, which all the clauses would be considered and tested again if this was to be going to the tribunal, for example.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the amendment? Councillor Powell, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mayor. Now, look, I've just got a couple of questions which arise really from this idea of it being in perpetuity. That's what really brought it to my attention. So, look, I assume that that these will become part of the conditions of the of a building approval. So, look, I'm just wondering what happens if somebody says, well, you know, like I'll put on a blue roof, you know, and then a couple of years later they decide, no, they really prefer a green roof or whatever. Can they change the condition? Can they go back? How would they actually try and amend that condition?
Director of Development Services. Manager Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, so once someone obtains development approval under the Planning Act, you can seek to vary or amend a planning approval. So conditions can change over time, but I guess the approval runs with the land. So if say, for instance, someone was to get approval and there was a number of conditions associated with this policy on there, and it was to be sold, it would be the responsibility of the new owner to make sure they're complying with their development approval. But if they want to change any part of that, then they can seek application to do that.
So would that be an application? Would that come to council, or would it be dealt with by the officers under delegated authority?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It depends on who made the decision in the first instance and what the process would go through with the new variation application.
Just following on with that, what happens if in a couple of years' time you get a new owner who perhaps doesn't want the permeable driveway, they want a concrete driveway, but they're willing to put in a tree instead? Is that can they do that?
Thank you, and through you, Matt. Yeah, as I explained in the answer to the first question, if owners change over time and they want to do something different, they would need to make sure they're still complying with their planning approval, as that runs with the land. Otherwise, they need to come back to the city for further approval to amend what has been approved. Okay, and that I presume would be the same case if it was a developer who was just sort of doing it on spec. Could they change their plans halfway through if their client said, well, I want something different to what you're proposing? Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, so if they've changed their mind after they get approval, then they would need to come back to the city to seek an alternate solution. All right, thank you.
Any other speakers to the amendment? I'll call the vote on the amendment then. All those in favour? All those against? The amendment's carried 8-1. So now we've got an officer recommendation as amended by Councillor Jennings' amendment. Looking for any final speakers on the recommendation as amended before I ask Councillor Stroud to close. Councillor Jennings.
It's actually a question, Mayor. Thank you. Through you. The planning regulations say it will go out for consultation for the required time. It comes back, and then council is to consider the policy with a view to the submissions, and then we can accept the policy as is, modify it or reject it. And the question is, do we have to, can the modifications that can be made, are they only in light of the submissions, or they can be other modifications? So they're in reaction to or to take account of submissions. Thanks.
Manager Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So if after advertising, council was to make changes to the policy in response to matters that not necessarily raised in submissions, we'd have to look at that probably in a bit more detail and see what the extent of those changes are, because it may require further advertising before it comes back to council.
Any speakers? Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thanks to staff for coming up with this policy. I think it's a good start. If there's, after testing it, trying it out, we can always amend it further if there are any holes or problems with it. That's not irretrievable, but I don't think there are problems with it. But, you know, that always becomes apparent when things become into use and people find ways to interpret things that we didn't anticipate. But nevertheless, you know, council down the track can fix anything like that up, and I think it's a good start. So, and thank you for being showing initiative to bring something that's unique and will be good for the environment and for people's living conditions in a changing climate. Thank you.
Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I accord with Councillor Jennings' comments on this, and I do feel that it shows that we're thinking very much in the sustainability area. What always concerns me, of course, is that the community knows that they're being consulted, and this is where we sometimes fall a little short, because I know it's advertised in the newspaper. Is there any opportunity for us to be able to send letters to households to let them know? Because I think this is an issue that touches the heart of our community and their concern about the environment. But this is just a question on notice, and I know it might not be able to be answered tonight, but it's just my vested interest in making sure the community know about it. Thank you.
Mr. Petrovski.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I think it's a great idea to promote engagement in most local planning or all local planning documents. So what we will do is advertise in accordance with our local planning policy and the regulations, just so we make sure we tick those boxes and try to have as much promotion as possible. Sometimes when you're sending out a lot of letters, that's not always sustainable, but taking that point on, yeah, what I think a good approach is to promote it through our channels as much as we can, and use the mediums available. There is also resources in sending letters, so I think we will look at a different approach to try get all of our target audiences, whether that's people who read the paper, some people who engage online. Yeah.
Okay, final calls for speakers. I'll ask Councillor Stroud to close. In that case, I will call the vote. All those in favour? The item's carried unanimously. That brings us to C3, Draft Local Planning Development Plan for the Coles Crossway Precinct. Preparation for public advertising. We've got an officer recommendation that the draft plan be prepared and publicly advertised, and an alternative submitted by Councillor Stroud. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation? Final call for a mover and a seconder. Okay, the item lapses. We'll go straight to Councillor Stroud's alternative. We'll take... What's the point of order, Councillor Kosovich?
Thank you, Mayor. Pursuant to Meeting Procedures Local Law 2013, Part 7, Section 7.5, I move that the debate on the substantive motion ceases immediately. And I'd like to speak to that for 5 minutes, please.
Which item are you not wishing to debate, Councillor Kosovich? The one that we've just had lapse, or
Yeah,
Councillor Stroud's
No, the alternative.
alternative?
Thank you.
Councillor Kosovich, two things. Firstly, you haven't raised a point of order. You've moved a procedural motion. Also, 7.5A is the, and now I think I'm advising you on what to do, but it's the product of a particular procedural motion being carried. If you read 7.5, it says that the motion that the meeting proceed to the next business, if carried, has the effect that, and there's four things that can happen, including that the debate on the substantive motion or amendment ceases. So I think what you're wanting to do is to move a procedural motion that the meeting proceed to the next business. Now, before you get to speak to it, I'd have to have a seconder for your procedural motion. Councillor Burns. Okay, you can speak to your procedural motion, which, just to confirm, would be under meeting procedure rule 7.1A. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you for that correction, Mayor, and I appreciate your forbearance with that. Let me begin by saying that after giving the need for a local development plan for the Crossways and former Coles site, which are identified as key development sites in the city's local planning strategy, due consideration and much careful thought, I don't believe there is any merit in proceeding with this debate any further. Let me add that I am greatly relieved Council has just voted down a draft LDP for the Crossway site, prepared by consultants, as the community would have been greatly dismayed, if not alarmed, that their council was even contemplating asking them whether they would support redevelopment at the Crossway shopping precinct that is at the corner of Rockaby Road and Bagot Road, with the distinct possibility of giving the green light to a 9-storey plus development. I repeat, a 9-storey plus development at this landmark high point on Rockaby Road. And that is not to mention the associated knock-on effect in terms of excessively high development north of Bagot Road along this premium strip of Rockaby Road. This contrasts sharply with the Subiaco Activity Centre plan base heights, which are 4 storeys with 2 storeys along Rockaby Road to provide for an appropriate interface with the Hay Street heritage area. And moreover, at what cost would it have been to our Rockaby Road historical streetscape? Not to mention our prosperous shopping / entertainment precinct and thriving CBD and its associated village amenity. It was not long ago that this council, in recognition of the city's commemorative...
Councillor Kosovich, just to confirm, you're meant to be speaking to the procedural motion. Are you speaking about the substance of what you're not wanting to debate, or are you trying to convince us that we should support you in your procedural motion?
Support me in the procedural motion. I'd rather that go to the vote, Mayor, if you hear me out. I've nearly finished this.
Okay, just, yeah, to the extent possible, try and keep it in relation to the procedural motion, because that's what we're debating. The very point of what you've proposed is that we won't debate the merits of 7.3.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'll cut to the end of this. Let me conclude by suggesting that there are more important pressing business matters for Council, not to mention alternative development considerations and options, other than commencing work on the LDP for Crossways and the former Coles site at this point in time. Accordingly, I move that Council moves to the next business item on the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call the vote on the procedural motion. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, the procedural motion's carried 5-4, which means we move straight on to the next item of business. The next item, C4, the tender for the E.H. Parker Library Restoration Project, having been pulled by the en-bloc vote by Councillor Burns. We've got the officer recommendation, no amendments or alternatives, so I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation, please. C4, E.H. Parker. Councillor Jennings moving. Councillor Hammersley seconding. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't wish to speak to it. I'm hoping to hear from Councillor Burns, I guess, as to why he pulled it.
Councillor Hammersley? Any speakers to the item? I'll call the vote then. Got to be quick, Councillor Burns. Are you speaking for or against? Okay. Councillor Burns. Sorry, where's your microphone? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Look, very briefly, I'm just a little, I wanted the matter pulled, so I wish to vote against it. I'm a little concerned at, I'm not suggesting there's anything untoward about the tender process or anything else, but the tenders were limited. The company that is being awarded the project, I'm not familiar with and find little information on it. So really, I've pulled it to vote against it, and that's just for almost for a matter of record. I do not expect it to not proceed, but that's the end of it. Thanks.
Any speakers for? Any other speakers at all? I'll ask Councillor Jennings if she wishes to close. I'll call the vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 8-1. The next item, C5, which again has been pulled from the en bloc vote. We've got the officer recommendation, no amendments or alternatives. C5 relates to the tender for pay-by-phone parking system providers. Can I have a mover for the officer recommendation, please? A mover and a seconder. Councillor De Vries and Councillor White. Councillor De Vries, Councillor White. Any speakers? Councillor Burns.
Along the lines of the previous item, I wish it noted to vote against it. My main problem with this system is that not everybody actually has smartphones. It would be a very small portion of people that don't, but they do exist, and I find it unfair that we're putting in a system where if you don't have a smartphone or whatever else and you like to pay things with cash, and there are people, and they're usually people in lesser economic circumstances or just object to technology or have trouble with it. So I do not consider it particularly democratic, even though I think the system, it works. So that's all.
Any speakers for? I'll just ask a quick question of staff. I think it's for Director Technical, Manager Commercial Services and Property, Mr. Guest. Can I just have clarity on whether this app will replace cash payments for parking entirely?
Through you, Mayor. Most of our machines are actually cashless at the moment, and most local governments have moved that way because cash machines are a lot more expensive to maintain, but customers can still pay via credit card. So they can pay using the app or using the credit card. So even someone without a smartphone could still pay.
Thank you. Any final speakers? Councillor De Vries, did you wish to close? I'll call the vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 8-1. Okay, that's the end of all the reports that we're able to discuss in public. We've got 2 elected member motions of which previous notice has been given. The first at item 11.1 is Councillor De Vries' motion proposing an additional green waste collection. Councillor De Vries will move, and I'll be looking for a seconder for that elected member motion. Councillor Kosovich. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't come with a long speech on this tonight because I feel that this is something you either have a feel for and understand what the issues are in our community. But going back to last month's debate, it was a possibility with the Verge Valet collection that the community would have the opportunity to have additional green waste pickup. So I ascertained that there'd been possible need. But in subsequent discussions, it seems that the data that's been collected doesn't indicate that. So I've given that further thought. And really, I have considered how our community in 1 year have been required to undergo considerable change in how they dispose of their waste. I've considered whether they've been able to access advertising and understand the availability of this new green waste collection, the twice a year green waste collection, and also consider whether the community require a certain period of time to start commencing their use of these new systems. And in that consideration, I've determined that it's quite likely and quite possible that 1.5 years of a trial in this particular case with green waste pickup might have been impeded by the fact that the community did not widely know about times availability of green waste pickup. We can blame the community. We can say, oh, well, you didn't go on the website and check for it. But there wasn't the degree of advertising that there had been for Verge Valet, for example, which was widely promoted on the website and in the newspapers. It was not as widely promoted. I've also considered the option of a bigger FOGO bin that apparently I did not know, but apparently that might be available. Bigger FOGO bins, which I've not been aware was an option that's free, will not be suitable for many people for various reasons. A 240-litre FOGO bin is already pretty heavy. If you try and give yourself a 360 FOGO bin, you're talking about people dragging around a lot of weight, and that's actually pretty difficult. And that's something that you have to do because you move the bins to the front of the house and then you move them to the back. And it's not just a straightforward case of bigger bins solve the problem, because they're particularly not for larger branches and so forth. Then that also got me thinking about what we're trying to promote. And this is really what I believe is forward thinking. We're talking about encouraging our community to grow more trees on their property, and that's exactly what we should be doing. We need to have more trees. We need to increase our green cover. But when you think that you will not get the same service, and we've had a decrease in service, whether that's what you think or not, that's what I think, when you can't put your green waste regularly out and have it picked up every few weeks, 6 to 8 bags, and cut up wood, you actually might consider cutting down your trees or not planting them because it is inconvenient. And people's lives are dictated to some extent by convenience. It's not just a simple case of, people start chopping their trees down. I'm sure that won't happen, but we want to do the opposite. We want to incentivise people to grow more trees on their property. Now, an extra green waste pickup may not do that. But as you start to use something over a period of time, as you start to repeatedly do something, and twice a year, maybe that's just not establishing the pattern enough, but 3 times a year gives you that pattern, that consistency. It gives people the opportunity to get into the new system, and hopefully it's widely advertised. As I mentioned, I think that data collected in one period of time, which is, again, that was mentioned, data collection was indicating that there wasn't a huge demand. I actually don't really believe that the data collected in 1 year period is adequate to make a decision. Data collection, and this is qualitative data, this is weight and tonnage and so on, over a 1 year period does not take into account the fact that this is human behaviour. People's behaviour changes over time. That's the quantitative part of the data. So people may, in fact, change their behaviour over a longer period of time. But we don't do research and say, oh, look, I did 1 year of research and now I can prove something. So I believe that we need to give it a shot. I don't think it's a very expensive thing. It's estimated around $16,000. It was proposed, and I am supporting, in a sense, the previous recommendation from staff, if you like, but it's also because I want to increase incentives for people to grow more trees on properties, and I do link it to that. Thank you. I hope you support my elected member's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Kosovich. Any speakers against? Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you. As everyone's aware, I've also put in an EMM, which takes a slightly different approach, which is really to call for a report from the staff rather than make a decision tonight. It may end up being that Councillor De Vries' proposal is the one that would be chosen after consideration of all of the options and further interrogation of really what's going on out there. Now, the reason I put in the alternative is because I can't do an alternative to someone as the EMM. And, you know, considering the issues that have been raised with me, I didn't really think that it was an adequate answer to just add one more bulk pickup at the time of the city's choosing. And the reason I say that is because what some of our community members are grappling with is a big change, as I agree with Councillor De Vries. It has been a big change. And I don't think it is helpful to say that there hasn't been a reduction in service levels without going on to say for some people. For some people, there have been a reduction in service levels that they have depended on and utilised for a number of years. That must be balanced by recognising that a great number of our community members have had an increase in their service level. But when there's change like this, there's winners and losers. And what we're dealing with here is the people who have larger blocks of land with trees or live in a street where they've been gifted a verge tree that is very messy, and they have pride of place and they clean up after that tree. So what we're grappling with here is a service level where on probably 51 out of 52 weeks a year, somebody came past and picked up 4 to 6 bags of waste and a reasonable amount of prunings up to 1.5 metre in length. So that's a very different thing from having a bulk pickup once, twice or 3 times a year. You know, I don't think a bulk pickup is that convenient. It's not convenient to anyone who happens to be out of town that weekend. It's not convenient to someone who's tidying up their house to sell it. It's not convenient to someone who's got a particular issue in their garden that they need to deal with 3 months ahead of when the next pickup is. So there's all sorts of conveniences, and I just think it's better if we go through the options and make a considered decision. And in terms of the spending, $16,000, if you divide that by $45, that's 355 pickups that could be made available via the Verge Valet system at people's convenience on the week that they want to chop down their trees or prune their roses or do whatever it is. So there are lots of options. I don't have a preconceived notion as to what the best one is, but I think we should seek a report.
Any other speakers? Councillor White.
Thank you. Thanks to Councillor De Vries for putting this up. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure where I sit, and I'm very keen to listen to the debate further about it. But I really do think it's a great initiative that she's shown with this. And I know we can't discuss two motions together, but I don't see it as a binary. I don't think it's voting for one is voting is not voting for the other. In fact, I might do both. I would just say then, I'm not too sure about Councillor Hammersley's argument around the convenience, because as I understand it, we're at 2 pickups now, and we're adding 1 to go to 3, which I think would make it, in my books, more convenient, because if people are going away for the weekend, they might miss 1 in 1 year, 1 point, and there'll be 2 more to go that year. So there is a cost. It's clear that staff are not convinced the demand is as great, but I think the sentiment that I understand from over the last few months in the community for something like this is very high. So, you know, for me, I'm weighing up the staff advice that, well, we think we're meeting the demand, and I recognise that I think there's a limitation in what data we have around that, which speaks to a different point, a different motion. So I'm probably inclined to support it, but to be honest, I'm not entirely sure, and I'm very open for the debate, and I guess I just wanted to be clear with everyone about where I stood. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Stroud.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. What we actually voted down last month was an additional green collection, which our present consideration of elected members' motion is planning to now reinstate. We also voted down the ability to interchange an allocated bulk waste Verge Valet service with a green waste valet service. In actual fact, they could have used 2 of their Verge Valet services. And the other thing about Verge Valet is you could have also paid for extra Verge Valet. So you could have had the green waste collection plus 2, 3, maybe more green waste collections. That's what we voted down. I'm reading it straight from the minutes. It says, additional green waste collection and the ability to exchange Verge Valet with a green waste collection. You're given 2 Verge Valet services, and there was also Verge Valet Extra. So my concern here is if we don't go for a report first and get a better understanding, how do we know that this 1 green waste collection will be enough? Because we're only replacing one part of what we were offering last month. We were offering a lot more green waste collections last month than what we are now trying to substitute for. And unless we understand and know that that will be sufficient by staff doing a report with all the issues that are addressed in the next elected members' motion, then we could be back here again, you know, inventing even more green waste collections. Where does it all stop? So I would prefer, I just think it's tidier that we go first to a report, gather the information, think it out, and then decide whether we need 1 more, 2 more. Perhaps we won't need any. But let's do the report first. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I see this extra green waste as just returning to or providing or replacing the partly, you know, the service that we had before. I agree with the argument that we should be providing as much assistance to our community to maintain their trees and be encouraged to maintain them. And this is a small, I guess, incentive towards that, as Councillor De Vries argued. I don't agree that there's been an increase in service by FOGO, and that's not a criticism of staff or anyone, because we had to introduce FOGO. But when the FOGO bin now can hold, I think, if I remember correctly, is 2 to 6 bags of loose green waste. And I don't think, I'm pretty sure it couldn't fit in 6, but it's more like maybe it's 2 to 4. And before, residents could have 4 to 10 bags of loose waste a week. Whether they utilise that or not, objectively, that means it's a decrease in service. And as I said, it's not a criticism of anyone. as to what we voted down last month, the extra green waste collection was what was offered by as an add-on, or like a set of steak knives. If you vote for, if you buy the Verge Valet, you get an extra green waste collection. Not that wouldn't be appreciated, but it came as a package. So it wasn't just a question of us voting down the extra green waste collection. It came as a package with Verge Valet, and Verge Valet bulk waste collection principally was, in my view, was the initiative that was voted down. So it's a bit misleading, or it misrepresents the situation just to say that we voted one thing down. It was a package that was voted down. I don't think it's going to cost very much. I think that we will refine things if, as a result of getting a report, if that's what Council decides on the next EMM. There may well be more changes, and in any event, these things are not in concrete. They should be adaptable, and we should be adapting to what our to what the data says and what the community might need. It's a small cost relatively to do an extra green waste collection, a bulk one, and I think that as to convenience, well, everyone used to cope with the set bulk green waste days in the past, and I don't see it's any. People will be inconvenienced by having that, and as Councillor White said, having an extra one will create more convenience. So I'll be supporting this rather modest initiative, and that's not to say that there's other modifications that can be made to the current offerings, but for now I think that's a good thing to put this in place. Thanks.
Any other speakers? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Sorry, excuse me for one moment. Sorry, that's the reason why I'm not at the meeting, a bit of a chesty cough. Look, I'm not going to support this additional collection until there's evidence really that's needed. I think we're since last month we've almost been on a bit of ad hocery, and one of the things that I really liked about the council decision making in the last year and a half or 2 years has been that we've got the information first and then made solid, informed decisions. Whereas this time we seem to be going, well, sort of, we don't want the information, we'll make the decision. Now, I'm certainly not against green waste collections and bulk collections. In fact, I would have to thank all my fellow councillors for supporting the amendment last year that provided the 2 current bulk green waste collections. But as of yet, I have not seen any evidence of a great deal of increased demand for more services. And in fact, that would be very much supported, I think, by what the officers are saying, that, they have not seen that evidence yet either. When that evidence does happen, or when and if, then I think that's when you take a look and say, well, maybe we need to do something about it. But rather than instituting something that is going to cost the ratepayers more, whether it's needed or not. So, no, I think we get the information first and then make an informed decision, which I don't think this is about.
Any other speakers? I won't speak just yet, but I'll ask a few questions of Director of Technical Services, please. The first relates to the old bags that we used to use for green waste. We've retired those, they're no longer in use. So suppose a person has a big pile of leaves that they want to put out in the twice yearly or 3 times yearly bulk green waste collection, how would they put them on their verge?
Thank you. I'll direct you to Robert Wiley, the Manager for Waste and Infrastructure Maintenance.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McMullen. Yeah, they've previously they were collected, and we did collect them in the last bulk green waste collection. We have been advising residents to stop using them, but if we find them on the verge, we do still empty those as part of the green waste collection.
So as I understand it, residents can still use the old bags if they need something to hold their green waste in at the time of a bulk green waste collection.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor McMullen. What we've been encouraging residents to do is hold on to their old bags if they want to, and they can use them to store some excess green waste. Then each week, put that excess green waste into the FOGO bin, so they can use them as a bit of a storage device. But if we do find them on the verge in a bulk verge green waste collection, then we do empty them anyway.
Could a resident use a cardboard box or a plastic bin or something to put out their leaves or whatnot? I'm just trying to understand what the function of these bulk green waste collections are, and whether they're really intended for bigger branches and small logs and the like.
No, they couldn't put a cardboard box or a plastic bag. The intention of the bulk green waste is really for larger items, larger bulk green waste, and not small residential waste, green waste.
Okay, so I think this will be a question for Director Technical Services. I apologise to everyone for getting on to the next elected member motion, but I'm just going to do it in the interest of time. How long do you think it would take to...
Excuse me, I call a procedural motion.
I think what you need is a point of order.
Point of order, then whatever, but it's just that we're currently debating my elected member's motion. So if you're moving to the next item of business, I think, is that...
No, what I'm doing is trying to establish how long we are talking about stopgap measures for. So it's somewhat related to your elected member motion, but also related to the next one. So no, I'm not moving a procedural motion. I'm asking a question, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. How long would it take Director Technical Services to prepare a report to Council on service level requirements that are out there in the community in relation to green waste?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So we could provide everything we have at hand for the next OCM. Just be mindful that that's all the data we have at hand. That's just things such as tonnage, properties that have been serviced, and other items that have been requested in other elected members' motions. So I'm comfortable that we could probably do that next month.
Thank you. Look, in that case, I will enter the debate, and I'm going to speak against the elected member motion, because we're talking about a period of about maybe 1 month, maybe 2 at the most, in which people will have to make do with their FOGO bins to put out their leaves and smaller green waste collections. And if we given a bit more time to think about this a bit more clearly, then maybe we'll get to this point of a third bulk green waste collection. Maybe we'll do something else, but it seems to me that time is not of the essence here, quite the contrary. Life can go on, green waste will be collected, and we will be approaching our decision making, as Councillor Powell says, in the way that we have done for, dare I say, the last 18 months, more so than the last 2 years, but we won't go there. So it's a vote for, it's a vote against the elected member motion, not without acknowledging the proactivity and the sentiment behind it, but we don't vote based on proactivity and sentiment alone. We vote based on what is the best outcome for the community, and I think at this stage we don't quite know what that is. So if we give ourselves a month or 2 to work that out, then the community will be better serviced. So unfortunately, it is a vote against the motion from myself. Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, Mayor, if you finish, I just have a question. Thank you, through you. In terms of voting when we've got the data, for the June motion for Verge Valley and the proposition that we would get an extra green waste collection as part of Verge Valley, what data supported the offering of that service when people were prepared to vote for it without that data?
Director Technical Services.
Thank you. So a lot of that was put into the report and the recommendation from staff, really based upon feedback that we received, particularly in the final stages of in the lead up to the FOGA rollout, particularly at workshops, where one of the main concerns that was raised was about the larger items and the practicality of putting that into a bin. And that's where something like this was given as a possible option, and that's why we put it before council for a decision.
Councillor Kosovich. Thanks for pointing out Councillor Jennings to me. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Kosovich. So just to clarify, there was an apparent community demand, express demand for an extra bulk green waste collection that was going to be accommodated with Verge Valley, but now don't even know what staff's position is, but I do know staff's position. It's that this is no longer appropriate. So is that the correct summation?
Do you understand the question? Yep. Director Technical Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So maybe just to give some clarity. So obviously we had received that request, but it was really only a handful of requests. I would say it's probably in the order of 10 to 20 properties, and that's why we thought including as an option in Verge Valley, where it's obviously on request. So if there's only 10 or 20 requests in a year, Verge Valley can cater for that, as opposed to collecting for the whole municipality when there might be only 10 or 20 properties that have requested it. So it was really a tailored approach to those relatively limited premises that had made the thoughts known to us at that point.
The CEO, our Chief Waste Officer.
Just to answer, staff's position is whatever council resolve. So I just want to be clear about that.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply that staff had a particular position at the end of the day, but we have had correspondence that suggests that staff have a view on the matter at this stage. The question is, sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. The cost for the bulk waste collection, whilst it's not an on-demand service, the cost that we pay for it is based on or is this correct? The cost that we pay for our green bulk waste is based on the tonnage collected and the disposal costs of the tonnage. And so that is in effect, we're only paying for what is put out, even though it's all put out at once, which is...
That's correct. I'd just refer to, sorry? Yes, and there is a service cost if that wasn't mentioned, so yes. Yes, so obviously there's a service cost for the collection in addition to what is collected, yeah.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, CEO and Director. But is the service cost just a flat amount, or is it based on the number of households visited, time taken, amount of waste collected? Could you just explain that if you know the answer? Thank you.
A point of order, Mayor. Point of order.
Councillor Powell.
I don't think these are questions. I think this is Councillor Jennings continuing a debate. And I'd like your ruling on that, please.
It definitely goes very close to continuing the debate, but the point will be moot if there's not many questions left. Yeah, look, I think my preference as presiding member is that people ask questions before the OCM at the agenda briefing. If there's residual questions, then ideally they should be asked before someone speaks, because one would think that by the time you debate your position, you've asked all the questions you need. Look, I take the reasons for the point of order, Councillor Powell, but I don't think it quite gets there on this occasion. And given that there's no more questions to be asked, I think at this stage there's little to be gained by ruling otherwise. So if we can have the answer to the final question, I think we'll leave Councillor Jennings's questions at that. Mr. Wiley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McMullen. Yeah, we're given a flat fee for collections per tonne, which would include any service fee for staff and vehicles and machinery that's used to collect the green waste. So it's just a per tonne rate for everything.
Looking for any other speakers? Councillor Powell, your hand's still up, but is that up from before? Yep. Councillor Stroud, you've spoken, so you've got more questions?
Thank you, Mayor, because I don't believe we had the chance of asking questions at the ABF on elected members' motions, so this is why they're probably all coming out now. Just two questions. One relates to actually the bags, because I understand that we were running a promotion of handing in 4 and 5 bags and you got a bag of free FOGO. So I'm wondering what's happened to those bags, you know, in the sense that maybe a lot of those bags have been handed in. Now, if we are going to do more green waste collections and we need more bags, is that an easy order thing to do? Because people may well need to come and collect more bags. And is that included in the cost too of us producing more bags? Thank you.
Mr. Wiley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McMullen. Yes, we're still running that promotion. We haven't seen a massive uptake, probably less than 15, 20 bags of FOGO compost, and those bags have been disposed of. I wouldn't be keen to continue providing those bags because they are plastic, and we're trying to move away from bags. If residents want to hold on to the bags so they can utilise them as storage for green waste or whatever, then that's fine. But yeah, I wouldn't be keen to keep providing them to the community.
So how do we propose, and of course this is all what should come out in the report, but how can people put their leave litter out if they don't have those bags?
Mr. Wiley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McMullen. Well, obviously they have the FOGO bin, they have the option to talk to us and we can upsize the bin if they're struggling with the quantity of green waste they have. But I mean, even with the bags, unfortunately, they have a limited lifespan. They do break down in the sunshine or when they're exposed to weather over time. So, yes.
Okay, the point is we're trying to get rid of the green waste bags. But if we do if we do this green waste collection, it is still dependent upon it. Am I correct? Thank you. Okay. The next question is, I understand the difference between what, if we were to now run a green waste collection with a $16,000 cost price tag, that is based on an in-house city service, as against the offer last month where that extra green waste was going to be actually covered by the contractors who do the Verge Valet service. Is that correct?
Director of Technical Services.
Yeah, so hopefully I can give some clarity. So that figure of $16,000, I believe, was just given in response to a question at last month's OCM about what a negative cost would be for an additional green waste pickup, which was in the order of $16,000 based on tonnages that staff had estimated.
Yes, and so that is a cost because it's an in-house service. We're using our own trucks and our own staff and whatever to do that.
No, so this would be through our existing contract for bulk green waste collection. So using those rates and the expected tonnage, we applied that to give an estimate for how much it costs to do an additional green waste collection through that contract.
Any final questions, Councillor Stroud? Councillor Hemsley.
Mine's a clarification because I'm confused because I thought I heard two different answers to the same question. Is there a component of the paid to the contractor that is a fixed fee for engaging them for that service or not? Because I heard that there was a fixed fee plus a tonnage cost, and I also heard that it's just the tonnage.
Director Technical Services.
Yes, so I'll try and clarify. So to clarify, there is a service cost, which goes to the contractor for our bulk green waste collection, but that's on a per tonne basis, as Rob Wiley has advised.
Any other speakers, councillors? Councillor De Vries, do you wish to close?
I certainly do. Councillor Powell, ad hocery is not what is at stake here. This is the opportunity for us to make some decisions on behalf of the community we represent based on the data indeed. The data is our community have overwhelmingly rejected Verge Valet. They have done so. In fact, 67% of people in the Have Your Say survey did so. But they support and need the opportunity for increased waste pickup, green waste pickup. This is pretty simple, really. We have a community that loves its trees, that loves gardening, and as Councillor Hammersley pointed out, not everybody does so, but that doesn't mean the people who do not grow trees and have gardens are losers. They enjoy the benefits of those people in our community who do. They walk down the streets where people who have trees and enjoy their gardens as they walk past them. So it's not a singular winners and losers situation at all. Rather than seeing this as reactive, I see this as being proactive. With hotter summers, drier leaves shoved in boxes, thank you, Mayor McMullen, we will have increased fire hazards. What a wonderful way to welcome summer. The burning in Greece reminds us that we do need to get rid of green waste, as it can become very dry over a very quick period of time. We're in the middle of winter, so it's easy to forget that. The opportunity to clear our green waste, the hazardous burning material of summer, is something we should think about. I think the staff made it reasonably clear that there was interest at the community workshops in further green waste pickup. I do appreciate the tailored nature of it, but why does it have to be so? One of the difficulties people faced when they went on to the Verge Valet and, ordering the green waste, the Verge Valet service, was that they found it onerous, they found it tiresome, they did not engage with it. People do in other suburbs, the town of Claremont, they do it pretty simply, and it's very popular in Claremont. So I don't see why we can't have 3 regular green waste pickup per year. They do too, but we can do better than that. It's clear to Councillor Stroud that the issue of Verge Valet is linked to green waste pickup. It was not. It was an option. They were 2 separate issues, and I took it as 2 separate issues, and I appreciated staff raising it. We did vote down Verge Valet. Thank you for reminding us, Councillor Stroud. But tonight, I'm offering something to the community through, hopefully elected members will support this. I'm not personally offering it, obviously. I'm hoping that council, I can't go out offering green waste pickups, but in this particular case, it's not sheep stations. If at the end of another year it comes back, we come back in 18 months with better data and we say, look, that we can change it again. I don't see the immediate need for a workshop. I feel it's a pretty binary issue. It's either we go for this, and we've got another council coming to us soon, so that might be an opportunity for further discussion, but I do urge you to support me. And it doesn't mean I wouldn't support considering a workshop in some months to come, but not immediately. Thank you.
I'll call the vote. If everyone's ready to vote, we'll vote on the elected member motion. All those in favour? All those against? The item's carried 6-2. Sorry, that maths is wrong. 7-2. Okay, there's a further elected member motion submitted by Councillor Hammersley, also on the subject of green waste. We'll have Councillor Hammersley moving, and I'll look for a seconder. You're not going to move it? Okay. In that case, I assume you haven't authorised anyone else to move it on your behalf. We'll let it lapse. We'll move past item 12, because there is no business of an urgent nature that's been brought to my attention. So I will seek a procedural motion to close the meeting so that we can talk about matters affecting an employee, matters dealing with a contract, and matters which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to endanger the security of the local government's property. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the procedural motion? Councillor Stroud and Councillor Burns. All those in favour? The procedural motion's carried, so we'll go behind closed doors now. We're back out from behind closed doors, and I confirm that Council has made decisions on 3 confidential items. On item 13.1, Council's resolved 4 points as follows. Noting that no submissions were received during the local public notice period, resolved to lease 23 Olive Street, Subiaco, WA to Hay 263 Proprietary Limited on terms consistent with the terms contained in this report and otherwise on terms acceptable to the City. Authorise the CEO to execute any documents, deeds and agreements necessary to give effect to this resolution. Hay 263 Proprietary Limited be advised of Council's decision, and Council's decision be included in the public minutes of the meeting at which the report is tabled.
Sorry, I think we left out the amendment.
Can you flash up the amendment?
Correction. Point 1 of that resolution has parts A and B to it. So the grant of lease is subject to A, signage being provided at the car station at 23 Olive Street, directing long-term parkers to other nearby parking locations, and B, existing parking permits of affected residents being amended to include Churchill Avenue, Barker Road or other suitable streets for the duration of the lease. On 13.2, the CEO review process, it was resolved as follows: that the CEO performance review for 1 July 2022 to 30 June 2023, attachment 2, be endorsed and the CEO be notified in writing of the results of the review. That the CEO performance agreement and assessment 2023-2024, attachment 3, be adopted. And finally, Council endorse a 3% increase to CEO Cameron's remuneration for 2023-2024. And finally, on item 13.3,
We recognise who moved and seconded it. Just take gaps. Do they need to know that?
no. 13.3. It was resolved that in accordance with Regulation 17 of the Local Government Audit Regulations 1996, the City of Subiaco Regulation 17 review report be received. That brings us to the end of the agenda. There's no further business, so I declare the meeting closed at 8:26 p.m. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, staff.